ComNet now offers eConsole network management software. Hi, I'm Tom Exley with ComNet, and today I'm going to give you a video walkthrough of the new eConsole network management software. The eConsole software allows monitoring of the ComNet managed switches. It's available from our website, free of charge for up to 50 switches. There's also licensed versions for 100, 250 and 500 versions. Here you can see in our setup we have four ComNet managed switches. These are brand new out of the box switches. We've changed no settings other than to connect them in a linear topology using patch cables as you see here. Now I'm going to give you a walkthrough of the software and show you what features are available in the new eConsole network management software. Okay, so to get started, I've simply connected my laptop to any of the network ports on any of the switches that are connected in this linear topology using a Cat5 cable. And now I'll give you a walkthrough of the different applications within the eConsole platform and show you the features that are available. Okay, so I'm now on my PC and I've installed the eConsole software. You can find the eConsole software on the Start menu under All Programs, then in the ComNet folder, and then the eConsole folder. Here you can see we have three software applications that make up the eConsole software suite. We have the eCommander software, the eMonitor software, the eVision software, an uninstall option, and also a quick and easy access to the user guide that provides all the settings and configuration options for all three applications. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the eCommander software, so I'm going to select that one from the menu. So once the software is started, the first thing you'll see is a confirmation screen asking us if we want to use the application in license mode or in the 50 device free mode. If you've purchased a license key and you have the dongle connected to your PC, you can click OK and the software will operate in the license mode. Or if you want to use the 50 device free version, you can just click cancel. So with eCommander you have a menu item bar at the top of the screen and also a configuration menu down the left hand side of the screen. The first thing we need to do is to discover the switches and devices in the network so we can start configuring. So we do this by clicking the Discovery Filter button at the top of the screen. And then from here we can select the subnet that we want to search for. So in this example I'm going to choose the 10.100 address range and then click OK. Here you can see it's found four switches in the network and these appear with a little icon next to each one with a red line around the outside. This indicates that the switches are not yet logged into, so we can't actually make any changes. So to start configuring the switches, we need to log into them. So we do this using the Login All button at the top of the screen. And then entering our username and password. So once we've done that, you'll see that the switches now don't have the red line around them. And this means that we're now logged in and we can start doing configuration. So I'm going to select one of the switches. And here you can see it's opened up a new window and shows us exactly what is happening on the switch. So we can see that port number 1 has a connection, whereas port number 2 to 8 don't have any connection at all. Here we can also see that the power 1 LED is on, indicating that we're using power input 1 on the switch. And the other LEDs are greyed out, indicating that they're not actually being used. With the function menu on the left hand side, we can expand this and get access to all of the settings that you would expect to find in the switch from its web GUI menu. And we can actually browse into these settings and make changes directly from the eCommander software. So here if I browse into the switch setting page, we can then go in and change any of these settings and apply them and save them directly to the switch from the eCommander software. Using the menu bar at the top, we can also reboot a particular switch. And we can also open the web page directly to the web GUI of that particular switch to do some configuration using that instead. Below the switches themselves, there's a status monitor. So this provides us with an overview of the switches on the network. And here on the right hand side, you can see that currently these switches are all online. And we can monitor whether they stay online or if something goes offline. So if I was to disconnect a particular switch, then you'll see that that switch comes up with a red line and says that it's offline. And you can also play an alarm sound to indicate that the failure has happened. If I reconnect the switch, then the alarm condition will clear and the system will report that that switch is now back online. And here at the top of the screen, we can also change the query period and also the query timeout. Below the status monitor, we have the Scan Devices configuration screen. So this provides us with an easy overview showing us exactly which firmware version is running on which switch. And we can also do a scan every day or every hour to check them, make sure that nothing has changed on any of the switches without our authorization. The System Log Events window provides an overview of events that happen on the switch, and is supported by all the ComNet managed switches, and requires that on the switch itself you would enable the syslog event manager, and you would set the IP address to be the IP address of this particular PC that's running the eCommander software. Once you've done that, any events that happen on the switch, such as a power supply failure, port being connected or disconnected, would then appear in this menu. Below there we have the wizards menu, and this provides some very easy to use wizard setup for various things such as the group IP setting. So if you have a large amount of switches, you can set an IP range and the software will take care of programming each switch with a unique IP address based on the range that you give it. There's also a group firmware update. This allows you to update the firmware on switches of the same type but in a batch format. So if you have many switches all the same type and a new firmware version is released, you can upgrade the firmware very easily without having to connect to each switch individually. Below that we have the group configuration backup and also group configuration restore. These allow you to back up the settings from all the switches on the network into individual files that are saved onto the local PC. In the event that should a switch fail in the future and you have to replace it with a new one, you can then easily restore the settings from those backup files directly into that switch using the restore configuration wizard. The last wizard is the group redundant ring setting. So this allows us to configure the C-ring settings on each of the managed switches. So we'll use this one as an example to show you how the wizards work. So I'm going to select this wizard and then I'm going to click the next. And here you can see the 4 switches that we have in our network. So I'm going to select the switches that have the C-ring ports, or the ports that I want to use as part of the C-ring, as being the same ports on each switch. So for example, this switch here and the one below, both using ports number 1 and 2 for their connection for the C-ring. So I'm going to select those 2 devices and put them into the menu on the right hand side, and then click the next button. So here are my 2 switches. I'm going to say that I want to use the default ports 1 and port 2 for the ring, and then I'm going to hit apply. We get a message to tell us that this has been successfully done, and now those 2 switches have been fully programmed for the C-ring on ports 1 and 2. So I'm just going to now go back a screen, and I'm going to remove these 2 switches, and I'm going to put in the other 2 switches that I didn't do before and add them into the list. Click next, and then on these particular switches we're actually using port 9 and port 10 for the ring settings. So for these switches I'm going to select ports 9 and 10 and hit apply. So now those switches are also configured as part of the C-ring using ports 9 and 10. So if I was creating a ring with these switches, that would be now all I need to do to get the ring up and running, and I could now then connect the last leg of the ring to make the ring complete, giving you a very easy way to set up a full ring system. So that was a quick overview of the eCommander software. We'll now go ahead and take a look at some of the other applications within the eConsole suite. So if I go back to the All Programs menu in the ComNet folder, and then into eConsole, and this time we'll take a look at the eMonitor application, so I'm going to select that one from the menu. The eMonitor software provides a very easy to use application to monitor any IP device in the network that can respond to a ping request. Once the software is launched, the first thing it's going to ask us is to add a range of IP addresses that we want to monitor. So for this example, I'm going to use the starting address as 1 and the end address as 8. Then click the blue tick to add those to the list. And here you can see the 8 different IP addresses that I've selected using the range above. And I'll hit apply, and you'll see that those 8 IP addresses now appear in the monitoring window. And over here on the right, you'll see the total number of tests that have been completed and the total number of tests that have failed. So I'm going to go ahead and start the monitor going by clicking the start button at the top of the screen. So the system will now go out and ping each of these devices from 1 through to 8 and check and make sure that they get a response. So over here on the right hand side, you can see the tests going on. And in this example, I only have 4 switches from 1 to 4. So addresses 5 to 8, those devices aren't actually online. And here you can see this is shown. on the left hand side the icon has changed to red to indicate that those devices are offline, and over here on the right hand side you can see that they're actually failing the tests. So it's a very good way of showing if devices are online or offline, and also if any devices have gone offline for a certain period of time and then come back on again. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this monitoring process by clicking the stop button. And then I can go ahead and save this to an Excel file using the save icon. And I'm going to choose a name to call the file and hit save. And that will actually export these results of the monitoring application into an Excel file that you can open in Excel and get all the statistical information from. Okay, so we're now going to take a look at the final application within the eConsole suite. So again, I'm going to go to my Start menu, All Programs, ComNet folder, eConsole folder, and I'm going to select eVision from the menu. Once the software is started up, the first thing it's going to present us with is this wizard. So this helps us to actually detect the switches that we want to monitor, and also allows us to do some other settings regarding the map topologies and grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to detect the devices and click Next. And then I need to fill in the IP address range of the devices that I want to actually monitor. So I have IP address ranges from 10.1 to 10.4. So I'm going to change the end range to 10.4 and then hit the start. Here you can see above it's now telling me it's found these 4 devices. So I'll go ahead and click Next. And now it's asking me if I want to set up a group. We use groups in configurations where we have large amounts of switches, and you may want to group them into a logical location, for example into a certain building or a certain area. In this example, seeing as I only have 4 switches, I'm just going to leave that blank and hit Next. So this then brings us to the location part of the wizard. So using Google Maps, you can actually display the switches directly onto a Google map using latitude and longitude coordinates, which you can enter here in these columns. Of course, in order for the Google Maps to work, you need a dedicated internet connection from the PC that is running the eVision application. In this example, I'm not going to use the Google Maps. I'm going to concentrate on the standard topology maps that we use within the software. So I'm going to leave those blank and hit Finish. It's now asking us if we'd like to save this particular topology view. I'm going to go ahead and click No, because you can always save this from the File menu at any point in time later on. So this brings us to the default Google map, which as you can see is completely blank because we've not actually filled in any coordinates for where these switches are. So I'm going to go ahead and browse straight over to the topology diagram instead, using the topology tab at the top of the screen. So here you can see the 4 devices that the software has found. And they've appeared showing the different connections between each switch. It may not be in the exact locations that you want them to be in, so we can go ahead and click the Topology Management tab at the top, and then select Pick, and then we can actually move the devices around into any order that we see fit. Okay, so I've moved them out into a more logical layout. Here you can see I've actually set these units up in a ring. So following the configuration that I made using the wizard in the eCommander demonstration, these 4 switches are now set up to work in a ring. And you can see with the different lines exactly how the ring is behaving. So the solid black lines are the connections that are actually in use. And here the dashed line means that this is the backup connection for the ring. And currently it's not being used, but it's there in reserve should a fault occur in any of the other paths. And then on this switch here, 10.4, you can see there is an RM. So this indicates that this particular switch is acting as the ringmaster within the C-ring ring topology. So at the moment we're displaying these devices showing their IP address. You may want something more memorable to say exactly what they are. So we can go ahead and change this using the display drop-down box at the top of the screen. So I'm going to change these to system name. And here you can see it's now showing the part codes of these particular switches. But these can be changed within the web GUI or using the eCommander software to something more memorable, such as a building name or an area name, so that they mean something to the operator when they're watching the eVision map. So as well as moving the switches around using the pick menu, we can also right-click on a selected device and we can see device information. So here we can see on this particular device, port number 1, there is a connection. That is the connection to my PC that I'm doing this demonstration on. Since my PC does not support LLDP, there is no other information that the software can obtain. However, on port number 9 and port number 10, we can see exactly who the neighbouring switches are. So on port number 9, it's showing us the IP address of the neighbour, the switch name, and also its MAC address. And the same with port number 10. So we can see exactly which switches are connected to which ports. And then we can also see further details using the device detail tab, such as the system name, the object ID, and any group that the switch may be a member of. There is also a map info tab. So this would allow you to go in and actually add latitude and longitude coordinates retrospectively if you wanted to add this device onto a Google Maps. The other thing that you may want to change is the white background. If we're not using Google Maps, we may want to display these devices over the top of a predefined topology diagram or a site plan or some other map that you may have saved as a JPEG file or bitmap file, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and change the background of this map into something a bit more meaningful. So we can do this from the Edit menu, and we can go into the Topology View Configuration menu. So here there's various things we can change. We can change the background color, the foreground color of the text, and we can also tick options to show the port number on each link, which I'll now tick to do that. And we can also change the color of each of the lines for different states that they may be in. But the bit we're going to be interested in down here is the background option. So I'm going to go ahead and click the image file button. And I'm going to choose a map here that I prepared earlier and click open. And I'm going to tick this option to show that as the background of the screen. And then go ahead and click apply. So here you can see it's brought the map behind the switches. So I go ahead and click transform at the top and then drag this down so it fills the screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and select pick. And here I can actually drag the individual switches over the particular building locations where they are actually located. And here you can see that the text is actually now very hard to read. So this is where the option to change the font color and the line colors really comes into effect so that you can easily see what you're looking at on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and change those into something a bit easier to see. I'm going to go back into the Topology View configuration and I'm going to change the font color to be in white. And I'm also going to change the link normal to also be in white. So you can see now it's much easier to read the text and also to see the lines or the connections between each switch. So the software is also very useful in telling you when there may be a problem in the network. So if a link, for example, was to fail, then the system will actually show you that happening. So I'm going to go ahead now and break one of the connections of this ring. And here you can see one of the lines has now changed to red, indicating that that link has failed. And over here on the left-hand side, you can see that the dash line has now become a solid white line. So that backup leg that was there before has now become a leg that's in use. And the red leg here is a leg that's in failure. Down at the bottom of the screen, you can also see there are some messages telling us about topology changes within the network, along with the time and date of when that occurred. And then if that was to heal itself or the fault was rectified, so if I plug the cable back in again, here you can see that the leg has now changed to yellow, indicating that a fault did happen on that leg, but at some point has rectified either by itself or an engineer has fixed the problem on the site. So the yellow is just to tell us that some event has happened at that location, and we may want to obviously investigate why before we go ahead and think that everything is okay. So the way that we would get rid of the yellow is to go onto the General tab at the top and clear the state. So effectively what we're doing is acknowledging that we've seen that error message and that we're happy for everything to return back to normal. So once I clear the state, this line then goes back to being white, so the system is now back behaving as normal. The other thing that is of interest in the eVision menu is the device database management. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and show you how the device database actually works. So the device database contains all the different ComNet switches that support LLDP and SNMP. So if I click on one of them, for example, It shows us here the object ID, and then there are also various different icons for various different conditions that the device may be in. With the eVision application, you can also add third-party devices, and we can also monitor third-party devices as part of your 50 device limit or other device limits if you're using the licensed version. So the way that you would add third-party devices is using the add command down at the bottom of this screen, and you would need to obtain the object ID for the particular device that you want to add, and also then provide your own icons to use on the screen. But once you've done that, you can then monitor and support that third-party device within the eVision topology diagram. That was a quick overview of the eConsole network management platform. As you can see, it's very easy to use and has a lot of great features. You can download it now from our website and start using it today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact our design center team.